Alright guys, we're gonna jump over to the second game. Big old disclaimer. Big old spoiler alert. More than likely, they're going to spoil contents of Case 5 when we go into this Case 2-2. Because it starts off with present day, and then it flashes back to the day, I think the day after Case 4 of the first game, so just a little FYI. Let's begin. And I got the achievement, yay!
It was a ghastly tale of a winter's night. One of an invisible killer and a crime perpetrated on the pavement along Briar Road. As the victim lay at death's door, the mystery of just who had stabbed the young lady from behind had been resolved. But no sooner had my friend saved that Eastern Exchange student from his harrowing plight, than in the dim, flickering shadows of gaslight did a second bizarre crime rend the stillness of that very night. I dare say most can still recall the sensational headlines of the day. Haunted apartment of death, the condemned criminal's curse, the dread demon of coal gas. Yet, though the great detective had at once discerned the truth upon his arrival at the scene, it only proved to be the overture that announced the rising of the curtain on a most tragic play.
My name is Ryunosuke Naruhodo. I'm a fledgling lawyer, just starting out on my journey. 6 months ago, I arrived as a visiting student of law. Having made the long voyage across the sea from the Empire of Japan to here, London, England. And on the way, in quite extraordinary circumstances, I made the acquaintance of a world-famous detective. Currently, I reside in the attic of the detective's own lodgings, from where I run my legal consultancy of sorts. I've successfully defended a number of clients in Britain's highest court, the Old Bailey. But since a peculiarly grueling and unforgettable legal battle 4 months ago now, I haven't returned to the courtroom. In truth, I lost my right to return. But that epic trial was just one small part of an epic tale. A tale which is now about to awaken from slumber, thanks to a letter that arrived this morning from my homeland. Or he has a grumbly stomach. That works too. What a delicious smell wafting up the stairs. It must be nearly time for breakfast. I better go down to Mr. Sholmes' suite and say good morning to the great detective and his flatmate. "30th of August, 7:28 a.m. Sholmes' suite."
Ah, Bruno, good. I was just about to call up to you. The bacon's ready.
Good morning, Iris. It smells delicious as usual. Before we eat, though, I have some news. I had a surprise this... Shh! Not another word, Mr. Naruhodo. This could be just the abstruse thing for my pre-breakfast stagnation repelling mental stimulation, my dear fellow. Morning to you, Mr. Sholmes.
Ah, yes, I see.
So that's it. Holmes, why? Why are you so close to my face?
The truth is as clear to me as day. My facilities of observations have revealed it again.
What are you talking about? You, Mr. Naruhodo, you have, this very morning, met with a surprise. Well, is that not the case? Really, my dear fellow, it barely warrants explanation. Firstly, your hair is particularly unkempt, somewhat reminiscent of a bird's nest. Secondly, you have neglected to fasten the third button of your jacket. Clearly, when considered together, these two facts point to you having been flustered this morning. Can I talk now? But of course. Though I don't look for admiration, you understand. My hair always looks like this. It's been this way since I first met you. Oh, it has. And the button was ripped off last night, if you remember. By you.
Hurley pulled your button off?
Ah, yes, I recall the incident now. It was after supper, was it not? As the evening advanced, I picked up my violin and began to play the wailing notes of a haunting tune. But then, to my utter dismay, the third string snapped. Why did it have to happen? Why? Little wonder, then, that in my vexation, I grabbed the first button I saw and ripped it from its proper place. Well, I'd like it back now, please. It's troubling me that I can't fasten my jacket. And it's troubling me that you expect me to know where it is. Somewhere thereabouts on the floor, one presumes. Oof. Helpful. What matters at the present time, my dear fellow, is simply whether or not my deduction was unerring.
But Hurley, Runa said it when he came in, didn't he? I had a surprise this morning.
Well, that really is a surprise. Yes, this man is the pride of the British Empire, the famous consulting detective, Mr. Herlock Sholmes. There can't be a single person in the world who doesn't know his name.
All right, then. Enough of this silly conversation. Come and eat this bacon before it goes cold. And I have a new herbal tea for you to try, too. My latest special blend.
And here we have Iris Wilson, Mr. Sholmes' lodger and companion. A truly exceptional young girl, who's the author of a highly successful serialization here in London. Yes, The Adventures of Herlock Sholmes, as published in Rance magazine. So, Mr. Naruhodo, won't you put us out of our misery? What surprised you this fine morning? Well, I received a letter from Japan.
Oh, from Susie, you mean, was it? Was it really?
That's right. And she had some rather startling news, in fact. Ah, intriguing indeed. You must tell us all about it over breakfast.
Oh, yes. What fun.
Hold on. Let me go upstairs. There's something I need to do while I'm here by myself. I need to do this by myself. The office Spade. Now that Susato-san's gone, the shovelers aren't represented to correct me. The shovelers aren't represented to correct me. Maybe I'll have to do it myself. That's not a spade, Naruhodo-san. It's a shovel. Naruhodo! The kettle's gently simmering away there on the top of the stove as usual. It was kind of Susato-san to send that Japanese tea Iris really likes. But for me, it's the sound of the stove and burbling kettle I like the most on biting winter mornings. Oh. Susato-san's tea set that she left here with me. I still think green tea is just too bitter, though. Thank goodness for sugar and milk. Mr. Sholmes certainly wasn't expecting the acrid taste that one time. I've never heard anyone let out a scream like that before, or seen anyone fall down the stairs quite like that either. It always brings a smile to my lips when I'm feeling a little down. Aww. Ah yes, the Daruma doll I bought with me from Japan. I always intended to color in the other eye once I become a fully fledged lawyer. But it's still winking at me. Like it's trying to say, I can wait. Take as long as you need. Or maybe not. I'll just have to keep on doing the best I can, I suppose. What are my Accolades in here, too? Okay. The photograph of us all together that day. It makes me a little sad to look at it now, which is why I taken to lying it flat. Oh! But Mr. Sholmes righted it every single time, and I've grown accustomed to it. I hope we'll be together again like that one day soon. Oh! Now, at first glance, my desk here might look as though it's in a mess. However, it's not in a mess at all. Everything is exactly where I want it to be. But whenever Susato-san looked at it, she'd put her hands on her hips and say, "Oh dear." Her way of saying that I should make it a little more orderly and neat. Make it a more orderly and neat mess. I miss that. Naruhodo, you're making me sad! Look at the prawns and the anemones gently swaying around in the tank. Regular cleaning, some food, and fresh seawater is all they need. And some conversation, of course. It seemed like a lot of effort at first, but it was worth it. I'm starting to be able to tell what they're thinking. Really? Funny to think that so many people in London had aquariums like this once, when they were in vogue. You'd never expect to find sea anemones in the middle of the capital. I think I'll have to name them soon. One of them has to be named Charlie, Naruhodo. Name one of them Charlie. I never did see what Susato-san's room looks like. I could go in now, of course, but I don't dare. They say a young maiden's private chamber is a place of bittersweet secrets. Although, from the laughter I used to hear when Iris would visit, I imagine it's mainly sweet. Nothing. Oh, nope. There we go. It's Susato-san's desk. I suppose it won't get used now that she's gone back to Japan. It'll just have to wait here patiently for its old friend to return. Is that it? Did I check everything in here now? Bum, ba, da, da, dum, 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 dum. Ah yes, this is where you note down ideas, isn't it, Iris? What's in the melting pot today? The blue carbuncle?
Yes, it's from a case theft that Hurley solved ages ago. The theft of a precious stone. A carbuncle is another name for a garnet, you see? Especially if it's cut with a round top.
Oh, really? And this garnet was blue, was it?
Well, that's the thing. They're usually red. No blue garnets have ever been discovered.
Oh.
So who knows what the stolen gemstone actually was? That's the real mystery of the case.
A proper Herlockian conundrum, huh? I bet it is.
I can type with my eyes shut, you know?
I can believe it. When a deadline's approaching, you sound like a Gatling gun.
That reminds me of a dream I had the other day. It was such a funny one. It woke me, actually. I was typing for a whole hour in the pitch black, but I didn't make a single mistake.
That's incredible.
But then, when it got light, I found that there wasn't any paper in the machine.
Oh no!
Now I wonder if I actually been typing at all.
I think you might just have fallen asleep on the job. There are so many different bottles up there on that charming little set of white shelves.
Oh, do be careful, Runo. You mustn't try the contents of any of those bottles, even if you're hungry.
I wouldn't do something stupid like that. I'm not a child, you know.
Well, I wish I would say the same for Hurley. The other day he polished off a full bottle of one of my Accolades.
He what?
He said he was hungry.
I'll be extra careful. I look forward to finding out what aroma your tea will have, Iris. Every single day.
Ah, well, I infuse a different concoction of herbs from the garden every time, so it's never the same twice.
When you call it a concoction, it sounds more like a science experiment than something for tea time.
Oh yes, that's because different blends can have very different properties. Some calm you down, some make you feel jolly, some give you energy. Today's particular blend is something quite special, so you're really in for a treat.
That sounds ominous. Is that everything we can look at here? These are different pieces of evidence from cases you've solved, aren't they, Mr. Sholmes? Not quite, Mr. Naruhodo, not quite. These trinkets are selections from cases I've solved with particular aplomb. They are souvenirs of my success. Memories, Mr. Naruhodo. Memories. I really would love to taste one of Iris's tea. Really. So tell me about the case in which the bust of Napoleon featured. I forget. Memories, he says. Wonderful, Mr. Sholmes. Wonderful. Ah yes, the huge metal case, chess, with the lace cloth laid on it being used as a table for tea and coffee. It's very sturdy, that's for sure, and firmly locked shut.
That chest contains my father's detailed records of Hurley's many cases.
So I've been led to believe, though personally I've never actually seen inside.
And that's the way it will stay. Those papers are a secret between Daddy and me. If you go opening it uninvited, you might find yourself being bitten.
What? Is there a beast inside there or something? Maybe. When it gets this time of year, Londoners seem to leave their hearts alight all day long, and I love it. There's something very relaxing about watching the flames flit and dance about. But a fireplace in days of summertime is a waste of space, really no use at all.
Rather like a great detective in days of no crimes and no criminals. Hurley?
But consider this, instead of a fireplace, a frost place. That's my latest idea. An extraordinary hearth from which emanates a cool breeze in the hot summer months. What do you think? I think if you invented such a thing, your name would go down in history. This sounds like an AC. The principle is extremely simple. One must, of course, light a coal fire in the hearth. Yes, of course. Brilliant. The trouble is, none of the fires I build ever burn cold. How it taunts me. So, as you British say, it's a bit of a damp squib? Give me a second. Ah yes, Mr. Sholmes' faithful musical companion. Wasn't this violin made by somebody famous?
Yes, it's a Stradivarius. Stradivarius. Though I'm afraid you'll have to save up for 100 years before you can afford one, Bruno.
But didn't you buy it for a song, Mr. Sholmes? I found it at a pawnbrokery among the forfeited articles. It clearly said Stradivarius on the label. What? The ignorant broker had no idea of its true value, you see, so I paid a mere 55 shillings for it. Yes, I have something of a turn for shopping. Herlockian, bargain hunter. But is it really a Stradivarius then? But of course, my dear fellow. It said so on the label. Someone could have easily painted that on. And I think perhaps the ignorant broker had something of a turn for selling. Books, papers, scientific implements. These shelves are stuffed to the gunnels. Mrs. Sato wouldn't be able to help herself if she were here. She can't stand mess.
Susie might not be able to stand mess, but she wouldn't dare touch those shelves.
Oh? Why not? I mean, they're Sholmes shelves.
Everything is in intricate balance. Hurley spends ages on it. If you were to touch even one thing, the whole lot would come tumbling down.
Huh.
Susie noticed it was a very delicate arrangement right from the outset.
You make it sound like a meeting of great minds. But the truth is, Mr. Sholmes just needs to tidy up. That machine really is imposing, isn't it? But I can never remember its name.
Hurley calls it his great analyscope. It can analyze anything at all.
That doesn't really help me. What does analyzing something even mean? Ah, an extremely astute question, Mr. Naruhodo. Sorry? Well, as Iris says, my machine here spits out analysis results of anything with which you care to present it. But now to interpret those results, that's the key, and I confess I have no idea. Clearly, I'm going to have to construct a great analyscope, analyscope to solve the problem. 2 analyscopes? That might not help. Anything else for me to hunt for? Okay, looks like we're done. Actually, can I hit this one? No, I can't. You see the VR up there? Yeah. I wanted to hit it, but that's because that's a Sherlock reference, but it won't let me, so. Alright then. Let's present my armband. Oh, Mr. Sholmes, about this. Shh, not another word. Ah, yes, I see. This would be a collar for a breed of miniature canine with a particularly long neck, and for winter use. Actually, it's the armband I always wear that symbolizes my role as a defense lawyer. Precisely, which leads us to but one conclusion. Your arm is, in fact, the particularly long neck of a miniature canine. I'm starting to wish I'd never shown him this now. The man's barking mad. Okay, we are talking for reals now. This is the letter that arrived from Japan this morning, by international post.
Oh, how lovely! Look at Susie's beautiful writing. I wish I could read it.
And how is your judicial assistant faring, may I ask? She's very well, thank you. In fact, according to what she's written, she's actually appeared as a lawyer at the Japanese Supreme Court and won a case.
Oh, really? Oh, isn't she wonderful?
A cut above your good self, my dear fellow. I've won cases too, you know. Apparently, Mr. Natsume appeared in the trial as a witness. Man, Natsume just gets no breaks. Natsume. No, I don't recall that name. Of course you do. We helped the man. Twice. You know, in those 2 cases that took place on Briar Road 6 months ago. Ah, the mustache twitchy man with the somewhat feline eyes and the mustache. You said mustache twice, but okay.
He didn't have 2 mustaches, Hurley.
Yes, who could forget those 2 cases? They made a very deep impression on me. Although I must confess, the details are a little hazy now. A very deep impression they made on you. Clearly. So, what was this startling news penned by Mr. Sato? Do you remember the case of the haunted lodgings, Mr. Sholmes? Ah yes, it's very interesting, you know. I don't feel entirely uncertain that a case of that nature did not occur. He's totally forgotten then. Anyway, in her letter, Mrs. Sato asked that we read over her case notes again and investigate further. Though it took place half a year ago? For what purpose? Because of something that Mr. Natsume said to her, apparently. 1 second. Took a drink of water. Don't mind me. He suggested that the real reason why she was called back to Japan so suddenly might have something to do with that case of the haunted lodgings. Oh? And Mr. Natsume's return to Japan, Mr. Sato's father questioned him about the case, she says. And something Mr. Natsume said appeared to trouble Professor Mikotoba, prompting him to send that telegram.
Oh, that case! Yes! It was very strange, wasn't it?
Yes.
And I had compiled the whole story into a nice, neat manuscript, ready for publication, too. But then Hurley here was all funny about it, remember? He was very mean. The story must not be published, she said, very mysteriously as well.
Really? I said that? Are you sure? Do you perhaps know something about it as well, Mr. Sholmes? About why Mrs. Sato was suddenly told 4 months ago that she had to return to Japan?
It's been 4 months now since we waved Susato off at Dover. It was such a shock, wasn't it? The way she just suddenly announced that she had gone back to Japan.
Indeed it was, due to a telegram she received from her homeland, I believe. That's right, telling her to return urgently. Yes, because her father had passed away. Sholmes! Sholmes! Do you understand what you just said? No. It just said he was suffering from a high fever, the cause of which was unknown. he's not dead. But according to this letter, that news about her father's fever was just a ruse.
A ruse? So Susie's daddy lied to her so that she'd make the voyage back home? Why would he have to do that?
I have to admit, I have absolutely no idea. But she believes it's almost certainly related to the case of the haunted lodgings. Summoning her back to Japan so suddenly like that. I wonder what Miss Susato's father is hiding.
Huh. Hurley, do you know what it's all about?
Ah, well, who can say? What? But you said... Please, I have engagements, my dear fellow. My calendar is quite surprisingly full today. And a stringent analysis of the matter would be excessive, I feel, even if I were quite at leisure. So, man the fort in my accents, won't you, Iris? It sounds like you're dodging the subject.
I will, Hurley. Don't worry. See you later.
Again, Holmes, I think you're dodging the subject here. He scuttled off rather quickly there. I think perhaps Professor Mikotoba isn't the only person hiding something here. Soseki-san was involved in 2 cases, but only one of them was forbidden from being published. By, of all people, Mr. Sholmes.
Aha! I found them at last.
Iris, are they...
The notes about the case. That's right. Sus and I compiled them together. The case of the haunted lodgings. Do you want to read them, Runo?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Iris. I have no idea what secrets could still be hiding in the shadows of this case. But perhaps if I read over the notes again, something might come to light.
That's the spirit!
And so, Iris and I decided to read over the case notes again together. Everything from what happened to our investigation and that fierce battle in court that followed. Reliving every detail. I just need to find a clue, and I have all the time in the world. Because, of course, I'm no longer allowed to practice law in the courts of Great Britain. Now that's not true, Naruhodo. You have like 3 cases ahead of you after the second case. It was 6 months ago. A mysterious incident that unfolded on the wintry streets of London. A young woman was found lying on the snowy pavement on Briar Road with a knife in her back. Fortunately, her life was spared, but she was unconscious for several days following the incident. God, they had to use this track. The fog was thick, and nobody saw her attacker, but by a cruel twist of fate, a visiting Japanese student was walking behind her at the time and was duly arrested. That man was Soseki-san, and the man who effected his arrest was Mr. Sholmes. Believing in our compatriot's innocence, Susato-san and I decided to represent Soseki-san in court. And, after a grueling trial of many twists and turns, we finally managed to prove his innocence. Joyful, joyous, jubilant jubilation! Was the man's reaction after the trial. But his jubilant jubilation was short-lived. We received a telegram from Mr. Sholmes the following morning. The victim of Briar Road stabbing has regained consciousness. Hurry to Bart's at once. So Susato-san and I summoned a hansom and headed immediately to the hospital. February 5:30 a.m. St. Bartholomew's Hospital. Recovery ward. There you are at last! Good morning, Mr. Sholmes. I think not. Oh! You're late! What on earth took you so long? Your telegram only arrived at 5 o'clock, Mr. Sholmes. And it's 20-minute ride to the hospital. That's right, and it's 5:30 now. I think we made very good time.
The time is utterly irrelevant. The fact is, I have been waiting for what felt like an eternity. In point of fact, I myself was awoken at 4 this morning by a telegram boy. And feeling it was somewhat unjust that I alone had been roused at such an hour, I sent one to you.
Well, thanks for that.
Anyway, you're here now, so the victim is over there. She's only just regained consciousness.
There she is.
You should introduce yourselves.
And I shall observe from here. Okay. So that's the lady who was found on the snow-covered pavement with the knife in her back.
Her name is... Ah yes, here we are. Miss Green.
Well, first, let's examine everything. Look, there's a photograph in this frame here.
Oh yes, it's a picture of a young gentleman.
He looks to be about the same age as Miss Green, I would say. Perhaps the young woman's special someone, do you think?
My, Mr. Naruhodo, I didn't know you had a sense for matters of the heart.
Not in the least. I sincerely said the first thing I thought of. This rounded wooden figure isn't the most charming, is it?
Ah, I don't think that's a decoration, Mr. Naruhodo. It's an artist's mannequin, I believe, used when practicing sketching the human form in different poses.
Really? It's not exactly what you call a typical figure for that purpose, though, is it?
No, I suppose not. I confess I've never seen one quite so full-figured before.
Well, if you want to draw a full-figured person, it's the right tool for the job. The rat is not selectable, by the way. There are lots of bottles in that cabinet, aren't there? Do you think it's safe to keep them like that?
If you were a patient here, I feel sure you'd take some medicine by mistake when you were half asleep.
That is a worry, but at least the cabinet has a lock, even if it's only a flimsy-looking one.
Oh, I've no doubt you'd managed to unlock that somehow while you were half asleep as well.
There are limits even to what I can do when I'm half asleep, you know, Mr. Sato. Ah, this looks like the patient's treatment notes. Let's see. Do not feed. What is this place? A zoo?
You know, I seem to remember seeing an almost identical sign in our local park.
For the pigeons, yes. This is a person. Poor woman. I hope she hadn't read this. That's rude! That is really rude, actually. There are all sorts of medicines in this cabinet, look. I'm not sure if it's safe leaving them in reach of everyone like this.
Yes, you're right. I can't imagine if you were peckish, you might try a whole bottle or two.
Well, at least there seems to be a little lock to secure the cabinet doors.
I don't imagine that would stop you if you were hungry. I worried that you'd break the lock.
Hunger doesn't turn me into a criminal, you know, Mr. Sato. Ah, this looks like the treatment notes for whoever's occupying this bed. Let's see. Do not permit to run around the hospital.
The patient doesn't seem to be here at the moment, so...
He or she is probably running around the hospital then.
Oh dear, how worrying.
What's worrying is why they haven't discharged the patient yet.
That must be a bag of Miss Green's personal belongings.
She would have been brought directly here after she was found stabbed on the pavement, though.
I expect a friend or family member probably brought some things for her.
Alright then, let's see what's inside. Change of clothes, no doubt, and... Why are we checking?
No, Mr. Naruhodo, you must never scrutinize a young maiden's personal belongings.
I'm like, she's right there! But the young maiden might have chocolates, or biscuits, or caramel. They're really playing up Naruhodo's need to eat in the second game. My god. Anyway. Good morning. Oh, hello. I'm a Ryunosuke Naruhodo from the Empire of Japan.
Oh no, was it your knife that... Are you the man who...
Oh, no. I'm a lawyer. And I'm Susaru Mikotoba. Pleased to meet you.
Oh no, was it your knife then? Are you the one?
No, I assure you, I'm Mr. Naruhodo's digital assistant. We heard that you regained consciousness and wanted to come to give you our best wishes.
Best wishes? For me? Thank you. I'm Olive Green. I'm an artist. Well, no, that's not right, is it? What I mean is, I'm trying to be an artist.
My God, she's a mood.
Well, what I really mean is, I desperately want to be an artist. But the truth is, I don't have any talent. I know I don't. It's no wonder I was stabbed in the back.
I don't think that's related, actually. Gosh, this young woman seems bend over backwards to put herself down. Seeing as we're here, we should ask her about what happened from her perspective, I suppose. To suddenly be struck in the back by a blade as you were walking along the pavement. What a terrible experience you had, Miss Green.
It was so cold that day, and the fog was so thick, I couldn't see a thing. That was 4 days ago now, I think. Is that right?
Yep, Viridian Green. Yes, that's right. I'm afraid you've been comatose all that time. 4 days.
But the case has been solved, hasn't it? Well, I've been here in hospital, I mean.
Indeed it has, my dear madam. Spectacularly by none other than I, Herlock Sholmes. No, not you. Mr. Sholmes, as you well know, it was Mr. Naruhodo's hard work in court that solved the case. Are you yet to hear what happened, Miss Green?
Yes, I'm afraid so. A gentleman from the police force is supposed to come to fill me in shortly.
Oh, I see.
Me coming around seems to have made everyone frantically busy. I'm so sorry. I should never have regained consciousness. It was selfish of me.
Oh my goodness. Oh no! We're all so relieved that you're on the mend, Miss Green. We really are. With that kind of attitude, maybe your surname should be Blue, not Green. So you're an artist, are you, Miss Green?
Oh, no, I couldn't possibly claim that. I'm a fledgling artist at best. I mean, I'm a student of art, really, at the Thorndike Academy of Fine Arts.
Oh my, an Academy of Fine Arts! Great Britain is such a wonderful country. Tell me, Miss Green, do you live thereabouts?
Oh, no, actually. I don't deserve it, but I have a little flat on Brixton Road.
I see. How very interesting.
Oh, no, is it?
Brixton is some 10 shops away on the underground from here. And Thorndike Academy is a mere 3-minute walk from Brixton town centre. Does that matter, Mr. Sholmes? Perhaps not, but Briar Road is a far less salubrious part of town by comparison, dwelt in by those of inferior means, including the maleficent Mr. Mustache. Inferior means? I suppose the Seki-san does fit the bill. It struck me as somewhat out of the ordinary for a young fine art student to be walking in such a distance. That's all. What's this? She suddenly clammed up. Mr. Sholmes, you should be ashamed of yourself, prying into a young maiden's private affairs. Oh dear me, do forgive me.
If you don't mind, I'm being discharged shortly, so I need to pack up my things.
Oh, yes, of course. We won't keep you. Thank you so much, Miss Green. Well, all right then. Is there a Mr. Naruhodo here? Mr. Naruhodo? Narrow fodder now? Well, if you're looking for Naruhodo, the lawyer, that's me, but... Ah, Mr. Naruhodo, good. This is for you. It's a message from, Mr. Saucy Nutmeg. Saucy Nutmeg! Mr. Natsume sent a message to me? But why would a policeman be delivering us message from Mr. Natsume? Exactly. What's going on? Saucy Nutmeg! What's a Scotland Yard constable doing playing delivery boy at this time in the morning? Mr. Saucy Nutmeg! Oh, what are we waiting for? Let me see that. Oh. Well, this is most unexpected. Is something wrong, Mr. Sholmes? Is something wrong, Mr. Sholmes, he says. Have you not seen this note? What, you took it from me! No, how could I have? It would seem that London's criminals have no intention of letting the great detective rest. A new case calls. A case of murder, no less. We must depart at once. Murder? Call a cab. Time is of the essence. But the trouble is, we've yet to read Mr. Natsume's note. I was thinking we ought to pay him a visit in his lodging once we did. That would be entirely convenient. Convenient? What do you mean? It's all here in the note, my dear fellows. The murder we must investigate took place at Mr. Mustache's lodgings. Wait, what? Again? I'll hail a fiacre at once. Fiacre? Fiacre? It was only yesterday that Soseki-san was in court, and we were dispelling doubts about his innocence. And now, the very next day, there's a murder at the man's own address. He may very well be the unluckiest man. Or so it seemed to us at the time, but we were soon to discover it was worse than we thought. Saucy Nutmeg. That's never going to go away in my head for a while. 21st of February, 7:18 a.m. Mr. Natsume's lodging, ground floor. Oh no! It's that mysterious stranger! What on earth? Oh my! The gentleman is deceased, without question. He's dead. Locum student, Mr. Naruhodo Esquire! Mr. Natsume. Oh, why? Why is this happening? Why to me? I've only just got out of court yesterday. I was finally home after 2 days of misery. And then I wake up the next day to this. No early bird should catch a worm like this. Wonderful worm without wiggle. I see you in high spirits again this morning, Mr. Mustache. Ah! Not the horrible hairlock Sholmes. Shove off. Show yourself the door. I never invited you. Mr. Sholmes came here with us. I'm quite sure he'll be able to help you, Mr. Natsume. Or make things worse. I am entirely at your disposal, Mr. Mustache. What can I do for you? Get out! Gregson! Tisk. Here they are already. The busybodies. Ah, Inspector Gregson. What a pleasant surprise. Pleasant, is it? Gives me heartburn every time I see your face at a crime scene, Sholmes. Ha! I deduce, Inspector, that your heartburn is the result of your excessive consumption of fried food. Good morning, Inspector. This is a crime scene. Don't you go touching anything. Or good morning to you too, Sunshine. Well, this is quite a scene that we've just entered. Oi, I said hands off. You're gonna mess up my crime scene. Oh, no, I just wanted to look, that's all. No chance. I know your kind. You'll mess it up just by looking at it. Ugh, someone's in a bad mood. There's certainly some bad air in here, isn't there? Alright, it sounds like I better talk to the inspector first and try to curry some favor. So, Inspector, what was the victim's name? Or who was he? Mr. William Shamspeare. He was a lodger here. William Potency has turned into William Shamspeare, and I love it. As you can probably tell, he was an actor. A bit of a dead loss, as it happens, or just dead. Mr. Shamspeare. Oh boy, I'm gonna have fun saying that name over and over. It was the landlord, old Mr. Gardev, and the other lodger, Mr. Natsume, who found him. The fella didn't rise as his usual hour, so Gardev got worried and kicked the door down. But doesn't Mr. Gardev have a bad leg? Ah, yeah, you're right there. It was that jittery Japanese hunchback over there who actually did the kicking. Really? Soseki-san? The victim was pretty hard up, it seems. Even done some time inside for petty crimes. He had no money, no place to go, and no friends. His only acquaintances were the people in this house. Miserable life and a miserable end to it. So, what exactly is Mr. Natsume still doing here? He's not involved in the investigation, so shouldn't you have sent him away from the crime scene? Well, I'm not saying it's because the fella looks odd or anything, or that he acts suspicious, but I thought it would be prudent to take a statement from the culprit. I mean, the cohabiter. Wow. You nearly said culprit there, didn't you? Oh dear. Mr. Natsume appears to be under suspicion again. He indeed is wearing a gaita. It certainly seems that way. He does just come across as such an odd fellow, doesn't he? Poor man. How unfortunate. Anyway, I can't say much until the coroner gets here. But I don't think the fella's been gone that long. The body's still warm. Even if the inspector would allow it, I don't think I could bring myself to touch a dead body. Alright, well, now we can properly examine stuff, right? Right, Inspector? Thank you. Or there's check marks on everything, so I can't really check anything, can I? What a terrible thing to have happened. It's only been 3 days since I was arrested for the incident on the pavement outside. And then, having finally regained my freedom, it starts happening all over again. Endless existence of excruciating experiences! So the victim lived here on the ground floor, and your room is just 1 story up, isn't it? Yes, that's right. In a way, we were neighbors, I suppose. So did you know the victim? Were you friends? Were you friends? Okay, why are we reacting like this, sir? What's the matter with Soseki-san now? It was an innocent enough question, wasn't it? Why does he seem so shaken by it? What, I suppose he wasn't a complete stranger? But, did he ever invite me to his room? Never! Boy, that's suspicious. On my honor, I swear it! What an extreme reaction. You're probably wishing you'd never asked now, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo? When we found him here, I felt wretched, which is why I sent word asking you to come. Through that inspector over there. And then there's Sholmes. What the heck are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you posing like that? Mr. Sholmes, what are you doing? Ha! You need only observe to know it, my dear fellow. Investigating, naturally. There's nothing natural about that pose. Mr. Sholmes, have you made some miraculous discovery? Patience, my dear madam, patience. We've not been here in this room for 5 minutes. So far, I've only managed to deduce is what actually happened. Oh my goodness! But isn't that everything we need to know, Mr. Sholmes? Now that you propose the idea, I believe one could indeed see it that way. At the present time, I have managed to draw 2 incontrovertible conclusions. The first, that there was a physical struggle here last night in which the victim fought for his life. Ah! Why Mr. Natsume? What's wrong? Is something that Mr. Sholmes said significant somehow? No, don't mind me. Forget I was here. Natsume? And my second conclusion is that there was a poison lingering in the air here last night that passed the victim's lips. Nonsense! All right, Mr. Natsume, why are you reacting so extremely to Mr. Sholmes' deductions? No, please. Pretend I'm not here. Natsume, you are very suspicious, invisible, ineffable, inscrutable, insignificant. Impossible to ignore.
You must tell us everything, Mr. Sholmes. Spare no detail.
But of course, let the theatrical tragedy before us be unraveled by my great deductions, presented for your pleasure in 2 acts. We've heard some truly astounding great deductions from Mr. Sholmes in the past. No doubt this will be no exception. What miracles will unfold before our eyes this time? So, my dear fellows, for your delight and wonder, let the curtain rise. For Herlock Sholmes, Logic and Reasoning Spectacular, Act 1. Act 1. Cause of death. But right to it. Careful observation of the victim reveals to us the events that transpired in his disconsolate room last night. Foam at the mouth of the deceased clearly indicates the use of poison. Next to the victim, we notice a large dining plate, which contains, you will observe, 1/2 of a sizable bar of soap. Meaningful, indubitably. Why is this soap set so purposely upon the dish, like the victim last supper, in fact? Yes. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the fork reveals the answer. I love how Natsume looks at us just like, is this for real? It appears that the young man's appetite was his undoing. Taking up arms in the form of his cutlery, the victim engaged in a deadly battle for his life. Yet the struggle against his hunger was in vain, for in the end he couldn't resist devouring the slippery feast. But London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the contents of the plate. Soap and the ladder about the young man's mouth are too perfectly matched to ignore. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to excessive ingestion of foul soap. Though personally, I have a greater interest in the taste of foul candle wax, of course. Why? And then he turns into his outfit, poisoning from the soap ingestion. Suicide or murder? The cause of death identified. We proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? The audience will recall that death occurred during the victim's last supper. Did the man dine or die alone? The single teacup suggests the answer. To draw a conclusion on such meager evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. The careful criminal could have absconded with his own cup to cover his tracks. Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow. So, Seki, are you okay? Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the broken lock. Though forced open now, at the time of the incident, this door was locked. And the sole key was in the victim's pocket. In other words, when the victim consumed the poison, he must have been alone. Alone with his inferior soap, from whence wafted an inferior scent. And with that acrid aroma lingering in the air, the victim met his end, in tragic solitude. We can take the comfort only in the fact that his soul was well cleansed on its way to the hereafter. Okay, sure. No possible perpetrator presented. Or present. I don't know, Saseki's acting weird and I feel bad. Thus concludes the final act of Herlock Sholmes' great deduction. There's just one thing, Mr. Sholmes.
You are disposed to identifying just one thing, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo? Pray, what concerns you?
Well, no matter how hungry he was, do you really think the man would have eaten soap?
It's quite apparent that this man had barely a penny to his name. It is a curious thing, but to one so destitute, soap can suddenly appear quite irresistibly appetizing.
Well, he had some kind of money to be able to buy soap.
How extraordinary. In truth, I have tried a little soap myself in the past.
You've eaten it, you mean?
My dear fellow, it was some time ago now. My postulation was that it would cleanse my gut.
And did it?
As I writhed in agony on the floor and split the contents of my stomach, yes, I believed it did.
Well, it certainly cleansed your stomach in a way of throwing it up.
The experience taught me a valuable lesson. Soap is quite poisonous. It has an unpleasant taste and leads to great discomfort. In summary, I cannot recommend it.
Believe me, I wouldn't eat it even if you did.
There's something that troubles me as well, actually.
Oh? What's that?
It's Mr. Natsume.
Ah!
I couldn't help noticing he's shuddering and quivering out of the corner of my eye. Almost as if Mr. Sholmes' deductions touched a nerve somehow. Nonsense!
Well, that clenched teeth episode didn't last.
I think, judging by Mr. Natsume's reaction, the great detective's deduction may need some gentle corrections in order to reach the actual truth.
Yes, Mr. Sholmes' observations and deductions are sometimes a little too sharp. He has a tendency to hit the nail on the side of the head and drive it at an obtuse angle. When he does that, it falls to us to straighten things out. Alright then, let's see what we can do.
Yes, we must pick out the key words in Mr. Sholmes' quite brilliant deductions. And discretely exchange them for something that makes a little more sense. If we can do that, I'm sure we'll arrive at what Mr. Sholmes meant to say in the first place.
In that case, are you ready for the second performance of the day? An encore! Once again, my dear fellows, for your continued delight and wonder, let the curtain rise. For Herlockian Sholmes, Logic and Reasoning Spectacular, Act 1. Once more with feeling.
Careful observation of the victim reveals to us the events that transpired in this disconsolate room last night. Foam at the mouth of the deceased clearly indicates the use of poison. Next to the victim, we notice a large dining plate, which contains, you will have observed, 1/2 of a sizable bar of soap. Meaningful, indubitably. Why is this soap set so perfectly upon the dish? Like the victim's last supper, in fact. Yes. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Or, of course, the fork reveals the answer.
Soseki! Well, you can't deny that a fork implies the man was eating something, or about to eat something.
Yes, that's true. If I were to decide to eat some soap, I would prefer to use a fork than to attempt it with chopsticks.
And of course, only half of the bar soap is left on the plate.
But might there not be some other explanation? Something material that proves whether or not the man really ate some soap.
Do you think he was drinking tea with his soap?
The cup's empty, so there's no way of knowing.
How about this for an idea? Perhaps the cup was full of water, and he was dissolving soap in it so he could gulp as much down as possible.
Please remember that he may not actually have been the soap lover that he's been made out to be.
I suppose you'd eat soap with a fork, would you?
I don't think it's a question of which implement you'd use. You shouldn't eat soap full stop.
But then why? Why does the man have a fork in his hand?
Oh dear. I understand your frustration, Mr. Naruhodo, but please don't take it out on me. The point is, if we decide the man used this fork to eat the soap, we wouldn't be changing Mr. Sholmes' deductions. So we really ought to consider some other clues.
Well, there's another bar of soap on the ground. Hello? Look, there's more soap on the floor here. Mr. Shakespeare must have really loved the stuff.
Let's not jump to conclusions, Mr. Naruhodo. Look closely at this soap. Do you see that it would fit together perfectly with the half bar on the table?
What the? How can that be?
I think that there are two halves of the same bar that broke apart.
Well, let me present it. Camera.
Take that!
Bless! Oh my god! Look at the details on that DLC outfit now. Holy crap! I can like see little textures and everything in it. Oh, that's so cool. Okay, could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the other piece of soap reveals the answer. It being the other half of the soap on the table. In short, the victim was not eating soap at all. But it's obvious, really, for no depths of hunger could drive any man to attempt to eat soap. Even I, with my unquenchable thirst for practical knowledge, took only a single bite. But that begs the question of how the man was poisoned, because there's no sign of any food on the table. An excellent observation, Mr. Naruhodo, and one that furnishes us with the answer we seek. For London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the contents of the plate. Mr. Sholmes is still pushing the soap argument then.
Perhaps he's suggesting the man licked the soap rather than ate it.
If soap in London is that poisonous, I don't think I want to be washing my hands with it. But there are no signs of any food in this room at all.
Of course, food isn't the only thing that passes people's lips, is it?
Yes, a Western vessel for the serving of infusions of dry tea leaves.
It's a teacup, Mr. Naruhodo, as you well know. Stop putting on airs. And it's empty.
Ah, so we've already established that the victim wasn't eating soap when he died. However, there's significant evidence to suggest that he was drinking tea.
My thoughts exactly.
Are we presenting the tea now?
Take that!
Okay. Mental note, a little note to everyone. So, I have very good memory of the first 4 cases of the game, but everything from 5 and beyond, they're very hazy. Like I know how things go, I just don't know how to get to those points anymore like I used to. Because I played the second game only twice, and I think I've only done case 5 like twice too, so like, I have much better memory of the first 4 cases than I do with the later ones. So there's gonna be a lot of, what do I do again? Because I don't remember. Anyway, yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the teacup. Also, look at Shrunosuke, he's so cute, on his shoulder. Indeed, cups have been the vessel of choice for practicing poisoners over the centuries. And it would appear that this victim drank every last drop. There's no sign of food anywhere in the room. Are you okay, Soseki? Which leads us to the immutable conclusion. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to the ingestion of poison contained in this teacup. Oh, I don't like where this is going. Poison in the tea. This is gonna be bad. The cause of death identified, we proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? The audience will recall that death occurred during the victim's last supper. Did the man dine and die alone? The single teacup suggests the answer. The Western vessel for infused hot drinks again. It's already featured heavily in our deductions so far.
Yes. We can imagine that shortly before his death, Mr. Shakespeare was having a drink of tea. There would be nothing remarkable about that, but what troubles me
is Mr. Natsumi's reaction when he heard Mr. Sholmes' suggestion. There's more to this deduction than it seems. We must closely examine the scene of the crime again for some more clues. Okay, well, I'm pretty sure we look at his other hand. And there's another teacup. It's another Western vessel for...
It's a teacup! And it too is empty.
Given that he's actually holding this one in his hand, we can assume that this is the cup from which Mr. Shamspeare was actually drinking. Well, we're in trouble. Soseki's in trouble. But if that's the case, this changes everything. Everything we've deduced up to now is turned on its head. I have a bad feeling about this. I almost don't want to say it.
Yes, I know exactly how you feel.
Take that!
We must push forward, unfortunately. Did the man dine and die alone? This other teacup suggests the answer. Yes, there were 2 teacups in this room all along. Ah! In other words, this is a strong indication that at the victim's Last Supper, there was a guest present. At the very least, we can say now with certainty that somebody else was here in this room last night taking tea with the victim. What are you talking about? Oh, utterly, unbelievably, unjustly unreasonable. To draw a conclusion on such meager evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. In which case, what more can we deduce about this possible guest at the table? Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow. Do you mean to say you know who exactly was in this room at the time of the victim's death? I don't really want to end this deduction because this is going to not end well for Soseki. Indeed, what reveals the answer is this broken door. I'm not sure I like where this deduction is going. Me neither. I'm afraid it's too late to go back to the halcyon days of eating too much soap. But the identity of the guest who was in here last night when the victim passed away is something I have a very bad feeling about. Well, you can try to ignore your feelings, but we cannot ignore the truth, Mr. Naruhodo. No, I suppose not. Time to look around again. Okay, I think there's an Accolade for me here, but I'm not sure if I'm supposed to correctly present it or incorrectly present it.
Oh dear, the latch is most definitely broken, isn't it? The door was kicked in by Mr. Natsume, according to what Mr. Garrett told the inspector.
Who knew his short, thin little legs had so much strength in them?
I'm not sure the length of his legs is in any way significant here.
Perhaps this says more about the poor state of the door than about Mr. Natsume's strength, actually.
Careful. If he overheard that remark, he'd most certainly have a lively response.
I don't know. Can this broken lock really tell us anything about who was here?
It's empty.
Empty of liquid, but full of air. That makes you think, doesn't it?
It makes me think that you're full of hot air. We should be thinking about who else was in the room at the time.
Bother. Susato-san's quip in response was cleverer than my original riddle. You guys! At first glance, it seems that the only things in this room are the makeshift stage and the costumes. I overlooked these 3 books initially.
I wonder what they are. Let's see, the title reads... The Picture of Monsieur Lecoq, Canterbury Earrings, and... A Meal for Gabbro... Oh...
Soseki! Soseki! Wait, I'm sure I've heard those titles before.
It could just be an incredible coincidence, but... They're the exact same 3 books that Mr. Natsume purchased the other day.
What? Yes, on the day of the unfortunate incident when Miss Green was stabbed. Soseki-san had just been to a bookshop and bought them. That's right.
And now those 3 titles are here in the room of the victim.
Yet Mr. Natsume claims never to have been here before. Oh. Wait, what does this mean, do you think?
I really don't know what to make of it.
Okay, I know I gotta present those books, but there's an acolyte here. I think there's an acolyte here. One of the acolytes here is, I'll tell you, for erroneously answering Mr. Sholmes' question about who might have something that belonged to the convict. And I'm just like, is it here? I'm gonna falsely present something just for the hell of it. I don't know if it's gonna do anything. We can conjecture that this bottle may possibly have been bought here by a guest. And we can further conjecture that the guest's visit may possibly have occurred last night. That may possibly be rather too much conjecture. Do you not think, Mr. Naruhodo? To make a great deduction, you must step beyond the realms of conjecture and into the arena of facts. And I would conjecture that you may possibly never make the leap, however. Clearly it was Van Zeke! Okay, I'm not getting it there, so I don't know. Somewhere I have to do something with Mr. Holmes. I'm giving you the right answer now. Goodness. I don't want to, but I got to. Indeed. What reveals the answer, of course, is the pile of familiar books. Quite so. It's no mere coincidence these 3 tiles are there in this room. It's the link to the truth. Soseki! Ah! Oh god, we're in trouble. Mr. Natsume, you purchased these books 4 days ago at a secondhand bookshop. That's just a coincidence. In that case, you will be able to bring the same 3 titles from your own room, will you not? This very moment. Soseki! No! Never! Non-negotiable! If you can't bring your own copies here, it proves that these 3 books are in fact yours. Oh god, this is great! Having purchased the books 4 days ago and returned to your lodgings, you were arrested the very next day. So you could conceivably have brought the books here on that evening, but you never mentioned that. In other words, you could only have brought these 3 books here to the victim's room. This is so good. Hey, Vacarina! Last night, having returned to your lodgings after the trial concluded at the Old Bailey. In short, there is only one possible conclusion. The victim died here in his room last night as a result of poisoning. And that same night, the victim had a visitor. And that visitor... was you, Mr. Soseki Natsume. Thus concludes the final act of Herlock Sholmes' great deduction. Soseki Natsume, at the scene. He was just at the scene, guys. That doesn't mean he did it. This is awful. Also, it is pouring cats and dogs here. Hopefully, it's not gonna be thundering and lightning and try to knock my power out. Not again! Not again! Not again! Not again! Well then, Mr. Natsume. It would appear you're going to have to accompany down to the yard. Again. But wait! Hold your horses! Yes? Door! Key! Locked! Entry! Exit entirely! Impossible! He's so flustered, he's being even stranger than normal. What? You think that's an alibi? You could have just made a copy. What? You live in the same building, after all. You'd have plenty of opportunity, I'm sure. But... Misery me! Sorry, sir. You'll get your chance to give your side of the story later. The facts speak for themselves, Mr. Mustache. Ugh, you horrible Herlock Sholmes! He really has found himself an arch rival now, hasn't he? Come on now, no dilly-dallying. Outside, there's a carriage waiting. Welcome, student Mr. Naruhodo Esquire! I never imagined I'd be in this position again, but you have to help me! Please! Please! I'm innocent! Alright, I understand. We'll come to your cell later and talk about it. And one more thing! Oh, yes? My poor little kitty cat! Please give him his breakfast for me! Why is he still he? Why is it she? Once again, I'm pretty sure it was, mistaken gender until we get to the credits of the first game. And so, his evil curse still apparently unbroken. So Seki-san found himself once again the prime suspect in a case of murder. Thanks to the incriminating deduction of the great detective. Thanks! My dear fellow, that honor belongs to you. Oh, yeah, I guess it's our fault. We got to that deduction ourselves. Well, at least that means Inspector Gregson is no longer here. We can examine the crime scene in more detail now. Yes, that's right. And of course... What? Have you forgotten what the inspector mentioned before? It was the landlord, Mr. Garrett, who discovered Mr. Shanspeare. Ah, Mr. John Garrett. Yes. I expect we could find him in his sitting room on the top floor as usual. Right. We must remember to go and talk to him later then. Alright, we can finally examine. Let's look at stuff. Look at these extravagant, bright costumes. Somehow, they look out of place in this room with its grim, shady going-ons. This one looks like a king's attire. A king? I've always dreamt of being a king. Oh, I think you'd be more suited to a feudal lord. A daimyo, or such like. With a chonmeiji top knot? Every Japanese man wishes he had a chonmeiji. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, my bad. Oh, you'd look wonderful with one. And you already have the sword. Can you imagine what would happen if I walked around the streets of London with a chonmeiji and a sword? There would be so much staring, and the cops would probably jump you. As we've seen from the outside, the window is completely bricked up. A vestige of the former window tax that Britons had to pay. What strange things they used to tax in Great Britain. I mean, making people pay for the number of windows they had in the property. It's extraordinary. Chonmeiji, okay. Yeah, I was thinking that. It's heartbreaking to think of the poor having to block up their windows just to avoid an unaffordable tax. Oh! What is it, Mrs. Sato? If you look closely, a number of bricks are loose. There's more soap. Oh, yes. It looks as though an amateur has broken out a few of them just here. Was it Mr. Shanspeare who did it? I wonder. Being the lodger renting this room. Look at this, Mr. Naruhodo. On the outside, there's a ledge. And there's something on it. What's outside? Well, let me look at it. Oh, it's so cold outside. You could feel it through this gap. It did snow all last night. It would be cold. But more importantly, what is it on the ledge out there? What are those snow-covered lumps? It's more bars of soap. Soap? What are bars of soap doing lined up on a ledge outside the window? I have no idea. But the pair of them look rather charming like that. Still, that's very strange, isn't it? Bars of soap lined up outside the window. I think perhaps we should take one. There are two, after all. Oh dear. I suppose we could. Oh, what's this? Look here at this soap. Oh. Do you see? In the middle there. There's a patch that's a different color. It's sort of transparent, but some sort of fancy design, I suppose. Only in Great Britain. It looks like the Hinamaru flag of Japan, doesn't it? How wonderful. It's probably a very expensive brand. Expensive? Then what's it doing in this ramshackle little room? Bar of soap. A cheap bar of soap that was discovered just outside Mr. Shanspeare's window. It's one of two that were found there. Well, I can't touch this thing here, but, you know, I know that plays an important role later.
Oh, the poor man. So young to die. Do you suppose it was a very painful death? Being poisoned as he was?
I don't know. All we can do now is hope that he'll be reborn to a better life.
Yes, I suppose you're right. I wonder. Do you think that putting our hands together in a Japanese prayer will help a British soul?
Sorry? She doesn't have sleeves, so the book just kind of visibly shows up.
I made sure I had a reference at a ready for just an occasion as this, actually. This book is entitled The Beginner's Guide to Praying for the Departed, the British Way. I'll just reread it now. One moment.
There's quite a spine on that book, isn't there? That's gonna take a while. And here we have another disproportionately large machine. This looks like a meter of some kind.
Ah, this is a gas meter, I think. It seems that in this district, residents pay for gas as they use it with coins.
Oh, I see. Yes, now that you point it out, I can see that there's a slot just here that looks like it would take a coin. So you mean, if you put a coin in here?
That's right. That would buy you about 2 hours of gas for lighting and heating. Lights and heating.
So if you were a poor person with no money, you'd have to sleep in the freezing cold?
Yes, or if you were a scatterbrain with no change because you forgot to exchange your money at the bank.
Thank goodness there's no meter in our office. I'm going to assume no one's really checked. This is a gas wall light, isn't it? It must be connected to a gas pipe in the wall.
Gas lights? A gas stove? London really is a city of gas.
A city of gas. But now that I think about it, Mr. and Mrs. Garrett have had an open fire on the top floor, didn't they?
Oh yes, you're right. I don't recall seeing a gas stove up there.
Well, I must prefer a real fire anyway. It's so much cozier. Is there anything else here that I can check? Oh.
There's not much on these shelves, is there? Just this wine glass and bottle. And both of them are cracked.
Yes, not much use, are they? What's the matter?
Oh, I was just reminded of the Reaper, that's all.
Prosecutor Lord Van Zeeks?
Yes. He's so reckless with his wine glasses. I was thinking it's a waste that he should donate some to the needy.
And that you can suggest it the next time we meet. It's to donate to the needy. Oh boy.
This is some sort of makeshift stage, I think, isn't it?
Where does the audience sit, though, for the nightly Shakespeare performances?
Actors aspiring to be a great stage must practice their art, Mr. Naruhodo, with or without an audience.
Man, I feel that.
In fact, on a related note, perhaps you should step up a mock bench for the defense in your office.
What?
Then you could practice your art every single day.
I'll think about it, if you promise to don a beard and play the role of the judge.
Well, if that would help you achieve your goal.
This I have to see. Oh my god, Susanoo with the beard. Is there anything else? Okay, I seem to be missing something else here. The tea?
Ah, one of the teacups that Mr. Shamspeare and his guests drank from last night. But don't go drinking from them, Mr. Naruhodo. There's a bitter poison inside.
I'm not planning on drinking any, don't worry. Anyway, the cups are both empty.
That's true. So, one was Mr. Shamspeare's, and the other must be the cup that Mr. Natsume was drinking from.
But Soseki-san wasn't poisoned, of course. Perhaps we should take these so we can examine them in more detail later. Pair of teacups. The teacups used by Mr. Shamspeare and Mr. Natsume. The one with the green line around the rim was Mr. Natsume's. We're still not done. What else am I looking at? Wait. Wait, there's something on the ground.
What's this?
It looks like part of an envelope, I think.
Yes, I think you may be right. Perhaps it was torn off when the letter was open.
Is that significant?
Well, it's a little out of place, perhaps, when you look around the room. There's no sign of a letter or the rest of the envelope in there. Or the rest of the envelope, in fact, is there?
Ah, she's right.
And yet, here we have the torn off end of an envelope. It just strikes me as unusual.
I agree. We better take this just in case. Torn off end of an envelope. A ripped piece of an envelope that was found in Mr. Shamspeare's room. The rest of the envelope could not be located. There we go. Whew! Looks like you're having a good snoop around, eh? Hi! Inspector Gregson. Back so soon? After I threw that little Japanese fella in the clink, I went and reported this to the investigation division. In 5 minutes' time, this place will be cordoned off by the yard. Oh, I see. Well, we better be leaving then.
Poor Mr. Natsume must be feeling very low being back in a cell again so soon.
I'm sure we should probably go and...
What's wrong, Mr. Naruhodo?
Ah! Sir! Sir! Should you be standing?
Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow. A poor player.
Goddess theme.
That struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. Now, how soundeth the next part?
It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
Indeed! Oh, happy day! What? Walking Dead!
Wow, nice reference, Capcom! The original line was just he came back to life.
The fella isn't dead at all!
What was that nonsense he was saying, though?
I think, yes, it was from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. A soliloquy from Act 5, Scene 5.
Shakespeare. God! So it was that the victim, Mr. William Shakespeare, came back to life. If the man had indeed been poisoned, it transpired that it hadn't killed him. He was taken by emergency carriage to a nearby hospital for treatment, and Inspector Gregson evicted us from the scene of the crime. Wherever that now was. What the hell? I love how both of freaking Natsume's like cases have been with victims who have not died. 21st of February, Briar Road. Also, sir, what are you doing?
Whatever do you think will happen now?
Good question. What a strange situation for Mitsu Natsume. Arrested for murder, but then the victim comes back to life.
I think perhaps the victim was never dead in the first place. It seems very likely that Mr. Shakespeare did consume poison, as we deduced. But was it an accident, attempted suicide, or attempted murder? Until the truth can be established, I imagine the police will keep Mr. Natsume in custody.
I suppose so. Let's hope it doesn't come to anything more than a night in the cells. Oh, what's this? What's that man doing over there? He looks like he's trying to see into Soseki-san's lodgings.
Is something wrong, Mr. Naruhodo?
Excuse me. Could we have a word? It's that guy again. Ah! And then he leaves. He just ran off. I feel sure that I've seen that man somewhere before. Where was it? I do too, but I don't remember. There always seems to be bicycles outside the Gyarados residence. I read that bicycles are extremely popular all over Great Britain at the moment, in fact. That one seems very warped, though. Especially the front wheel. Is that to make it more of a challenge to ride, do you think? No, I'm afraid that may be a result of the rider's incompetence. For the front wheel to be so badly warped, I'm afraid the rider may have been similarly afflicted. Then there is a good chance Mr. Natsume has been practicing on this bicycle, I think. Oh dear. I fear you may be right. Saucy nutmeg or something! With the exception of the top floor where Mr. and Mrs. Gyarados live, all the windows are bricked up. Yes, that's because of the old window tax that was charged on the number of windows on a property had. In order to pay less tax, the poorer members of society filled in many of their windows. But the tax has since been abolished, hasn't it? With the windows, so the windows could all be opened up again, surely. Unfortunately, it would appear that the residents of this district can't afford to pay to have work done. Yeah, that is the sad state of affairs. Especially for people like poor Mr. Natsume, who have to live all cooped up in a windowless room. I suppose that's the price you pay for living in a very cheap accommodation. It all seems rather pointless when you put it like that. The Gyarados household and Mr. Natsume's lodgings are in prominent position there in a corner. Sometimes when I look at the building, I can't help feeling that it's at a bit of a slant. It does rather look as though it would collapse in even the smallest earthquake, doesn't it? And isn't it supposed to be haunted as well? I think I might have a hunch as to why Soseki-san has such a hunched back. London's blanketed in fog again today, and the sky is covered in cloud. But if you look carefully in the distance, you can just make out the Crystal Tower being built. Ah, the Crystal Tower, yes. The centerpiece of the great exhibition that's to open in 6 months' time. Everyone's talking about the Great Exhibition of London at the moment, it seems. Well, it's to be the largest event of its kind anywhere in the world, with technology and scientists from all over. I can't wait for it myself. Do you think visiting students from the Far East like us will be granted entry? I don't see why not. The last great exhibition that was held in London had more than 6 million visitors, it seems. And this time, the British are determined to make it an even bigger success to outdo the Paris Exposition. I see. That's an incredible number of people. And with so many people expected to attend, we should easily be able to slip in unnoticed. There's always the honest approach of buying tickets at the main entrance, Mr. Naruhodo. Oh, the snowman's still here. Why has somebody built the snowman on some sort of pedestal, do you think? That's not a pedestal, Mr. Naruhodo. That's part of the snowman's body. Really? But it already has a perfectly good body. Well, it's true that British snowmen are usually made with 2 balls of snow. Perhaps this is a foreigner. And now we're looking at him as if he's strange. Poor man. I know how he feels. Oh! If anything, it's Japanese and British 2-ball snowmen that are the strange ones, isn't it? After all, real people do have 3 sections: head, torso, and legs. Do you ever think that perhaps you think about things too much? That was deep! Alright, how about... Can we talk to Mr. Gyarados? Yes, we can. Alright, we can just bypass and just talk to Mr. Gyarados. Let's go. Oh, I see he's moved the curtain thing around again. 21st February, the Gyarados room. Here we are again. The eccentric landlord's eccentric top floor abode.
We're here because Mr. Garrett's the one who discovered the incident this morning. Don't forget.
Well, hello, sir. Ah, you chaps, eh? Yes, good morning, sir. Thank you for your cooperation in court yesterday. It was quite a trial. As much for Mr. Garrett as anyone, really. Came straight back here after all that business at the Bailey yesterday. Didn't expect to wake up to more bally nonsense this morning.
I wonder if you wouldn't mind telling us exactly what happened, Mr. Garrett.
Yes, I suppose you'd like to know all about that dead loss of an actor chap in the ground floor room. Those were exactly Inspector Gregson's words, weren't they? Oh, sir, you don't need to stand. Okay, all right. Okay, you can. Let's present my badge. Or armband. Mr. Garrett, could I show you this? Been quite a couple days, as you can imagine. I'm afraid I'm rather tired. Haven't really got the energy in the old eyeballs, to be honest with you. Some other time, then. I can examine stuff again, so I guess I'll examine stuff again. You look very dashing in your uniform there, Mr. Garrett. Ah, that old portrait, eh? Drawn by an art student who used to rent the room downstairs. Really?
Oh, you look so wonderfully young and courageous and strong.
Yes, well, the chap presented it to me one day and asked if I'd let him off the month's rent in return. Oh, I see. So, you did, presumably. I bollywell did not. Oh.
Oh.
A portrait is a portrait, but rent is rent, eh? And yet it's still there, proudly on the wall. Garrett, you swindler! We know what that screen is hiding now. The aftermath of the fiery altercation the other day. Don't suppose I'll be able to clear that mess up for some time now.
Oh dear, this must be a very difficult situation for you.
I'll say, people talk about twist of fate and whatnot. But this is a twist and a half, a rotten show all around. He's clearly struggling with everything that's happened. Good to see Mr. Garrett's Medal of Honor still proudly displayed on the wall.
The inscription reads, "For distinguished participation," if you remember.
Yeah, I remember. Because I remember thinking even I might stand a chance of picking up honors like that. Wouldn't know it to look at me now, perhaps, but I had my devil-may-care days, you know. Devil-may-care? What did you get up to? I don't know if I want the answer. Well, all in the past now, of course. And best left there. Best not? I want to know now. Ah yes, those enormous mortar shells. It's quite something seeing them up close, isn't it?
Didn't you say something about firing them into the barracks, Mr. Garrett?
Ah, you remember, do you? Just a little mishap that occurred during training one day. What are you doing firing on your own men? The captain bellowed at me. I'm not surprised. A little mishap doesn't really do it justice, does it? Well, one has these little incidents when one's a hothead young private. Perhaps I should put some evidence that resulted from one of my little mishaps on display.
Oh, does the great lawyer, like the great detective, want to exhibit some trophies of his finest moments?
Maybe. There's a single apron drying on that enormous cannon-shaped closed horse. Look, a horse! It's a horse now!
No, Mr. Naruhodo, that's a real cannon.
I knew that. I was just testing you. Naruhodo is being a funny man. Piece of history, that is. Seen plenty of action on the battlefield, I can tell you. Now, the old girl and I are just enjoying the peace and quiet of retirement together. And of course, she'd come in handy if the enemy decided to launch an attack again. Is there a war going on that I don't know about? I mean, World War I is around the corner, but other than that, no.
That's your military uniform, isn't it, Mr. Garrett?
Well, ceremonial garb, yes. Been hanging on the wall ever since my retirement bash. Not in active service now, you know. doesn't mean much to me anymore. You could have the odd thing if you wanted it. Old thing.
Well, it might suit Lord Van Zeek's, perhaps. An overly ostentatious outfit like this could be just what he needs.
Oh my goodness. Very tactful, Miss Susato. Very tactful indeed. I love how we're starting to imagine what Baroque would be in things.
Oh, a copy of Rance magazine. The Adventures of Herlock Sholmes is being read all over London. Isn't it wonderful?
Naturally, one asks oneself if such a singular detective could really exist. But, having met the chap, it's undeniable. He is most certainly singular. Singularity dangerous. That's genuine public opinion for you, Miss Susato. Perhaps it should be reflected in the stories.
Make no mistake, Mr. Naruhodo. I intend to snuff out the sort of public opinion we just heard personally.
I'm starting to see where Mr. Sholmes' untainted reputation comes from now. Excuse me. There's a good view over the wintry East End from up here. It's an oppressively gray scene. There's really nothing comparable in Japan. And down below, Briar Road, partly blanketed in snow.
And the pavement where poor Miss Green was struck in the back by that knife.
Thinking about it, this is the only room in this building that actually has a window to the outside world. Sometimes, Great Britain really does seem like a strange land, doesn't it?
I suppose all foreign cultures seem strange at first. Imagine how an Englishman would feel on arriving in Japan and seeing people with chumage topknots.
Well, that's a good point. That's an impressive collection of cakes on that fancy silver cake stand there.
I feel sure that it was full of cakes when we first investigated in here as well.
Yes, quite. Quite right. Haven't touched it since. Haven't done much at all, really, since it all happened. Time's rather stood still for me, you know.
Oh.
Time has stood still. Now that's an interesting phrase. I might be able to use that excuse when I'm next supposed to be tidying the office.
You could just tidy up, Mr. Naruhodo.
These shelves look like they've been completely torn apart by a wild beast. Reminds me of the Battle of Mainwan, don't you know? The experience of a seasoned veteran. Enemy had us surrounded on all sides. We really thought we were done for, the whole Bally Company. We were taking a real pounding with our cannons, so all we could do was run for our lives. Oh, I thought that story was going in a different direction, actually. Well, the whole experience taught me one thing, I could tell you. When you're done for, you're really done for. Ugh, that's not what a lawyer who often finds himself under fire wants to hear. Alright, I think we're done. Let's talk to Mr. Garadev. It must have been a real shock for you this morning. I hear that you discovered what had happened. Ah, well, that hopeless actor chap raises at 5 o'clock sharp every morning without fail. But at 5:30 this morning, he still hadn't lit the gas. So I went down and knocked on his door, but no Bali answered.
And that's when you broke into his room by kicking down the door?
Well, I called on the rum-looking Japanese chap to do the grunt work, of course. Wasn't it a little premature to kick the door down? The man could have just overslept by a half an hour.
That's very true, Mr. Naruhodo. If 30 minutes oversleeping warranted such behavior, I'd have to kick your door down every morning.
Wow. Well, you know, better to be safe than sorry and all that. Is it just me, or is he avoiding our gaze now all of a sudden?
Except that it was a sorry situation indeed that you found on the far side of the door.
The victim's name is Mr. Shamspeare, I believe. Is that right? Yes, William Shamspeare. Took the ground floor room 3 months ago now.
And how would you describe him?
A cheapskate? In a word, destitute. Destitute? Well, let's face it, the only redeeming feature of that room is the cheap rent. Anyone wanting to live in a place like that is either broke or has a bally screw loose. So hard to choose which category Saseki-san would fall into. Yes.
Mr. Naruhodo, that's a little rude.
He was doing research as well. Research? Into what? Shakespeare, of course. Shakespeare. Read a few plays of the old bard myself, you know. Romeo and Hamlet and all that. Romeo and Juliet, but sure.
Yes, William Shakespeare is England's most highly regarded classical playwright and author. He's known as Sao in Japanese, as you know, and many of his works have already been translated.
It seems incredible that Shakespeare has shortened to Sao, though. Someone was too heavy-handed there. There were a lot of costumes in the victim's room, actually, weren't there?
Of course, Mr. Natsume is a scholar of English literature as well. I imagine he and Mr. Shakespeare would have had much in common.
Shakespeare interpretation disagreement leads to shocking murder. Let's hope it's not that.
Mr. Naruhodo, really? How rude.
I don't know, I thought it was funny. After Mr. Natsume's trial yesterday, you came straight back here, I believe, didn't you? Did you notice anything strange between then and this morning? Well, now, must have been about 6 in the evening by the time I got home. Snow was coming down rather heavily, as I remembered, and it was completely dark already. That fail actor chap was out at the time. Mr. Garrett noticed there was no light from his room, or something, I supposed. Couldn't summon the energy for anything much, so I just sat in front of the fire up here. It was after 8 before Shamspeare got back, and the chap was up until past 1 in the morning, I'll have you know. Suppose he met his end sometime after that. I was asleep by then, so I'm rather in the dark here. Well, thank you. That was very illuminating. Is everything all right, Miss Osato?
Well, I was just thinking it's a little strange, that's all. Mr. Garrett, you were up here in your room all evening, if I understood correctly?
Not a big fan of stairs, not with this blasted leg.
Then, how is it that you seem to know? The precise movements of your tenant on the ground floor, I mean.
Huh? That's a very good point. I can't imagine that you could hear noises from the ground floor all the way up here. Does this old man like to spy on his tenants? Is that it? I say, I know what you're thinking, and it's a bally outrage. I'm ex-military, you know? Don't you know? I don't go spying on my tenants. Why would I? Because they didn't pay rent?
Then how did you know, Mr. Garrett?
It's the gas, woman! The gas tells me everything. The gas? Speaking gas? What on earth do you mean, sir? How can the gas tell you anything, let alone everything? Well, as you're probably aware, the gas is supplied to the building by pipes. Yes, I more or less worked that out.
Every room in the building is connected by a single pipe to the gas mains outside, and the gas company supplies gas to properties via the main.
Yes, I understand that too. Let me see if I can explain. Let's say I was to light the gas lamps up here. What do you suppose would happen? Well, obviously the room would get brighter. Exactly, but at the same time, the lights in all the other rooms of the house would dim for a moment. What? They dim? Why?
Perhaps it's because when you light a gas lamp, it briefly uses more gas than usual, and that reduces the amount of gas in the pipe for the other lamps that are connected to it. That might explain why the other lamps dim momentarily, mightn't it?
Yes, of course, because everything's connected to a single supply pipe.
Is that supposed to happen, though? It sounds rather undesirable.
Jolly good point. Fact is, the gas company's pipes in these parts are pretty hopeless, long worn out, and barely got any gas in them to start with. Opposite also true, of course. Extinguish the lamps up here, and they glow brighter in the rest of the house. Right, I see. So by watching the flickering of the lamps in one room, you can determine what's happening elsewhere. You've got it. Oh, of course, because when people come back home in the evening and before they go to sleep at night, what they're guaranteed to do is either light or put out their lamps first, and fires. Clever. In point of fact, the room on the ground floor and the one above it use slightly different amounts of gas. By watching the lights in here closely, I can work out almost exactly what's going on in the whole house. Gosh, that's fascinating, Mr. Gyarados. Absolutely fascinating. Oh, well, nothing to it, really. And I can't really see that it's going to help us with the case either. What I'd like to know is why Mr. Gyarados is so interested in what his tenants are up to in the first place. I feel like there's more to it than idle curiosity. Well, we've done as much investigating here as we can, I think. Perhaps we ought to go to prison and speak with Mr. Natsume again.
A good idea.
Bye, Mr. Gyarados. It's good seeing you again. Sorry about your wife. Oh, Soseki! 21st February, Loco Prison. Cell 9.
Look, Mr. Naruhodo. Mr. Natsume, have the police finished questioning you now?
Locum student, Mr. Naruhodo Esquire! Oh, yes? What is he? Tell me, is he a ghost? Is he there to haunt me? Let me guess, you're talking about Mr. Sholmes.
He actually calls himself a great detective, Mr. Natsume, not a ghost.
But his diabolic deductions, they're not of his world. They're not of this world. They've left me. Ah, curses! I'm cursed, I tell you. Well, that sort of hurts.
Credit where credit is due, Mr. Naruhodo. You were heavily involved in the deduction, too.
Yes, moving on. We have some wonderful news. Oh?
The victim that we all thought was dead has come back to life again.
Now, in the absolute worst case, you could only be tried for attempted murder. That's great, isn't it, Mr. Natsume? It's terrible!
Oh.
I'm stuck in the cell, suffering from some silly wrong end the stick. You did it, didn't you? Confess, you're the killer. Why the mustache? Constant questions. I'm sorry to hear that. Ah, that selfish shyster! Make up your mind. Are you dead or alive? If you were going to come back to life, why bother dying? Wickety, washy, wishy-washy William! Well, it seems likely that Mr. Shamspear was never actually dead in the first place. Ah yes, that might make sense, and I'm pleased that he's alive, of course. Our lively debate last night was much fun. I'd be sad to think it was our last.
Oh.
Oops. Mr. Natsume, does this mean that you did see the victim last night? You met with Mr. Shamspear, didn't you? I'm not saying another word! I demand to have a lawyer present! I am a lawyer, sir. Who do you think I am? Please, Mr. Natsume, we need to hear your side of the story. Why am I cursed like this? I don't know, Soseki, but give me a second, because I need to drink, and I also need to stretch for a moment. Oh, wait! Hold on just one moment. We're not talking to Soseki. I want to see... Is it today? Can I do this today? No, I can't. Okay. Alright. There's another scene with Miss Green and Potency. So I was wondering if I could do it or not. But we can't, so it's okay. Alright, first, let's present the armband. As always. Have I shown you this before, Mr. Natsume? Oh, yes! The sweet, sweet aroma of our beloved homeland! It shows that the wearer is a defense lawyer. It means nothing in Great Britain, of course, but I still wear it. Oh, I know exactly how you feel, locum student Mr. Naruhodo Esquire. My Haramaki belly band! I don't feel right without it! Your Haramaki belly band? It's perfect for the cold English winters. Just the thing to keep my tummy warm. Ah, yes, I see the link. Almost. Was that a little TMI? Maybe just a little. What happened? Can you tell us exactly what happened last night then, Mr. Natsume? There's nothing to tell. But, Mr. Naruhodo Esquire, I'm eternally grateful to you for helping me with that accursed case yesterday. The case that saw poor Miss Green hospitalized after she ended up with a knife in her back. It's hard to believe that was only yesterday. After the trial was over, I trudged my weary way back to my lowly lodgings. And that evening, at past 9, it must have been, I visited Mr. Shamspeare. Oh, you did go to the victim's room then? As we feared. I didn't do anything wrong! I'd never been to his room before! It was the first time! Then, what made you decide to go? I bumped into him when I arrived back at the house. We got chatting and it developed into a discussion. But he had to go out, so I bade him farewell. That ties in with what Mr. Garrett said, that the victim went out and came back after 8. We met again after that evening, at around 9 or just after, when I took him some nice tea I brewed as a gift. So it was you who brought the tea that had clearly been drunk at the scene then. And I suppose you were discussing the works of Shakespeare, were you? That's right! That's exactly right! Romeo and Juliet! Who was the stronger? It was a delightful debate. I'm sure. Such a stimulating subject, Shakespeare! And the debate became very heated, so you slipped poison in Mr. Shamspeare's tea? No! Never! Not at all! Team Juliet won! That was me! And when I left his room, the flamboyant fella was fighting fit! I swear it! Categorically! Okay, Juliet won. Good to know. Cursed existence. Mr. Natsume, you often say the same thing about yourself, I've noticed. That you have a cursed existence. I'm sure I've mentioned this to you before, but I've been here in Great Britain for a year now, and in that time, I've learned that it's no place for me. It can be very trying to live in a foreign land and adapt to the ways of another culture. There are foreigners everywhere I look, and they all stare at me. They all laugh. That's the impression I get whenever I go out. It makes me scared to leave my room. Which is why I've become a recluse. But even in my room, I find no respite from my fears. I've moved more times than I can remember. And then 1 week ago, I moved into Briar Road. But why? I mean, why did you choose that place? It doesn't seem very comfortable. Because the rent is cheap. I have so little money, it spoke to me. The rent. Obviously, there's a reason why it's cheap. Because the room is cursed. Cursed? Cursed how? The previous occupant, the man who lived there before I took the room, died there. Oh no. He was only a young man, but one morning he was found dead and no one could explain why. Surely no one would want to live in a room with a history like that. I didn't. When the letting agent recommended the place, I wavered. But I want books, and books cost money. A horrible history is a small price to pay. When I realized it would mean I could buy more books, I signed the lease like lightning. Brave or blinkered? But after I moved in, I soon came to realize what I'd done. I realized how horrible that room's history really was. Gosh, was it really so awful? He loves his books, man. He could make a house out of books if he wanted to. How did the room's horrible history affect you, Mr. Natsume? What happened? At first, it was just a feeling. The feeling of beady eyes boring into my eyes. Boring into my back, watching me. Do you think that might just have been your mind playing tricks on you? No. My mind doesn't know any tricks. It was something else. It's been one long nightmare ever since I was given the keys to the place. A nightmare? You've been having bad dreams, you mean? All the souls who've died in that room, I leaned over me in my sleep, and tried to strangle me! That really is horrible. And now I come to think of it, it happened again last night too. The very same night that Mr. Shamspeare was writhing in agony from the poison in his body. I was on the verge of being suffocated silently by those miserable spirits in my room.
You simply must move out of that room as soon as possible.
Yes, you're right, I know it, and that's why I'm already searching for the next room with a history to call home. Please, not a bad history.
I think perhaps you should try to avoid accommodations with any kind of history at all. Otherwise, I'm scared that you yourself may become history.
Oh! Whew. Susato-san knows how to make the man listen. Of course, Mr. Lord of the Manor is worried about the curse on the room as well. You mean Mr. Garredev? Yes, he knows that if people keep dying there, he'll never be able to rent it out again. Well, that's true. I, for one, wouldn't go near the place.
Ah, perhaps that may explain why the landlord pays so much attention to the gas lamps in his tenants' movements.
You mean because he's worried about their well-being? He does seem to have an unusually keen interest in the amount of gas in the pipes. There must be a reason why he keeps such close tabs on the occupants of his let rooms. What do you mean, he pays so much attention to the gas lamps?
Oh dear, no, it's nothing to do with you, Mr. Natsume. Please, forget I said something.
Oh, now you're talking about me behind my back as well. What's important is that Mr. Shamspeare isn't in fact dead at all. Once he's come round, he's able to tell us what happened. We'll be able to get you released. Yes, please! Oh, I do hope you're right! Excuse me? Gregson! Inspector Gregson, I couldn't help overhearing what you just said, and on that note, I have some good news and some bad news. Oh! Which do you want first? Always, every time, the bad news comes first. When hope is all you have, hold on to it. That's my guiding principle. Right, well, in that case, the good news it is. Huh? Sorry, but it's just a lot easier to explain everything that way. Gregson, why would you even ask? Then why did you ask me in my preference? As you might have heard, Gregson's a funny man. The victim, Mr. Shamspeare, was just unconscious. He's come round now. Yes, we saw it happen in all its terrifying glory. He's still being treated by the doctors, but we've managed to get a written statement from him already.
Oh, isn't that wonderful, Mr. Natsume?
Oh, thank goodness! It's all over then! I can leave this somber cell! We got the bad news still. Sorry, no, that's not on the cards. What?
Why ever not, Inspector?
Mr. Shamspeare has implicated someone as being responsible for what happened last night. Implicated someone?
Oh dear.
You don't mean... I'm sorry to say I do, yes. He's pointed the finger at you, Mr. Natsume. Oh! By sweet poison did he seeketh to end my life. That wicked catheth, Soseki Natsume.
No!
So I'm afraid you'll be appearing in court as planned. You'll be wanting to make the necessary preparations. No! You know, he has the same, shocking reaction as Gregson. They use the same... I wonder if Natsume and Gregson have the same model, too, now that I think about it. Because he has the same flipping out animation as Gregson. And so, once again, Soseki-san found himself to have to take the dock in the Old Bailey. Whether his room was haunted or whether he was just terribly unlucky, I knew I had no choice. The following day, I would represent him in court and do my utmost to break the curse that blighted him. Oh, to be continued. Or not. Okay, there it is.